Beauty. So yeah, thanks everyone for jumping on tonight. To reiterate what Rat said, it's fantastic to have so many coaches on, and like Mark said, I'm going to be talking about developing your coaching, and there's a fair bit of stuff I kind of want to get through. So like Mark said, if there's any questions, send them through. More than happy to get to those throughout. So with tonight, there's, I guess, a few themes that we're going to touch on and discuss. I'm going to be sharing a lot of my experiences and a lot of my stories throughout the presentation. But at the end of the day, this presentation, it's not about me, it's presentations for you. And I want you to think about, when I talk about some of my experiences, well, how can I relate that back to you? So, what can you take away from it? And something Andre Romanis, I've heard him say before, is basketball, it's a game of opinion, not a game of fact. So there's going to be some things I present on that you might agree with. There might be some stuff you might disagree with. Okay, but think about what you can take away from this presentation, and then how can you relay that back into your opinion on what basketball is and how it should be coached. Throughout, I'm going to ask plenty of questions, and want you to really reflect on yourself as well and where you are right now on your path as a coach. And with that, when I do ask questions, I want you to give yourself an honest evaluation and really reflect, be honest, being self-aware. That's really important. You want to continue to learn and develop. And then towards the end of the presentation, I'm going to link it back to some things that might be really helpful and really relevant for you, particularly those coaches who are about to start the club and the rep seasons that are about.
Are you still working tonight, or?
Yeah.
Just one thing, if you're not, if you're on, can you just mute yourself just so there's no background? Thank you. So to start off with, like I said, I'll go through my development as a coach and I guess, well, how I got to where I am today. So as you can kind of see by that first photo, like most of you, I started basketball at a young age and started playing and fell in love with the game, very, very early on. From there, I realized pretty quickly that if I wanted to stay in basketball, if I wanted to work in basketball, probably wasn't going to be through playing. I played 5 seasons, presented basketball in Cairns, and only one season I made a Division I team. So I had a pretty modest playing career. So I realised after I finished top age 16s that playing probably wasn't it for me. So then I changed my focus and started to really invest in the refereeing side of things. And at the age of 15, at Cairns Basketball, I took on the referee coordinator role there, where I did all the rosters. I was in charge of all the referee development. Plus, I was focusing on my own individual refereeing game and spent refereed a lot of games, put a lot into that. Got to a pretty decent level. I refereed QBL and refereed at a few national championships as well. But then again, I kind of thought about it and said, well, if I want to work full-time in basketball, it's not going to be playing. There's not many, there's no full-time jobs in refereeing. Plus, while I was doing that, while I was doing the refereeing stuff, I had started coaching and I was really enjoying that. And when I finished high school, I kind of decided I'm going to change my focus now to my coaching. And with that, when I finished high school, I was going to have 1 year off, have a gap year, and didn't really have any set plans on what I wanted to achieve in that gap year. But one thing I did do was I sent a few emails and I just asked some people whether or not I could just volunteer and get involved. And with that, one of those people I emailed was Aaron Fern, who Mark mentioned was the head coach of the Cairns Taipans. He's now over in Charlotte coaching NCAA basketball. So I sent him an email and he literally came back, it felt like 5 minutes later, and said, yep, no, let's catch up tomorrow. Let's have a chat about it. And we had a conversation, and just like that, I became a development coach with the Cairns Taipans. And that first year with them, I was strictly volunteering, and I went to every practice session, went to every game. I sat in on coaches' meetings and really just invested pretty much all the time I had into that. Then fortunately enough, my second year involved with them, I got involved in a little bit more of a larger capacity, and I was paid to do 10 hours of work for the type ends in the office, managing all the community stuff, so organising all your school visits, getting players to promos. So I was in charge of all that, and then the third year it kind of evolved a little bit more, and I was doing the development coach thing with the type ends. I was doing the community stuff with them as well. Plus I started as a part-time development manager for Cairns basketball. And then my final 2 years in Cairns, I was there in a full-time capacity, kind of doing a bit of everything still, but working full-time in the sport. And so that's kind of, you can kind of see the progression there. And then, after about 5 seasons, I was kind of at that point where I felt like if I wanted to continue to develop as a coach, I needed to go somewhere else. I needed to go in order to grow. So I needed to go somewhere different, get outside my comfort zone. I was really fortunate that the Southern BDO position became available, and really fortunate I applied, and was obviously really lucky to get, Mark and myself and Brad, we talk about it all the time. We have, the best jobs. We get to coach basketball every day, and it's a lot of fun. So, that's a really quick summary of my path. There's, certain things throughout that definitely overlap. Like most people, your timeline's not really as straightforward as what a timeline should look like. And there's probably a bunch of things I missed out there, but that's kind of a little snapshot of me and what has got me to where I am today. So first thing, I just want you to have a think about this. And one thing I'd recommend is, I'm going to have a bunch of questions like this. Write these questions down and have a think about it. Like I said, we're going to move pretty quickly, but write these questions down and then maybe go back through at the end and put down a few dot points for these questions. So first one I have is I want you to think about your path. So, what have you done in order to get to where you are now, specifically with your coaching? What's been your progression? What's been the things that have really stood out for you? So have a think about that. Next thing I'm going to talk about is the evolution of a coach. And this here is, I saw Pat Hunt, he presented this at a coaches conference I was at a few years ago, and he was super detailed as he is, and he actually had like 16 kind of dot points that explained the life cycle of a coach and what most of us at some stage will go through. So where does it start off? The evolution, it starts off with drills, and I'm sure most people can relate to that when you first, get appointed to a team, or, if you're a parent and you put your hand up and you volunteer. First thing you look for is, all right, what's some things I can do at practice with the team? And you look for drills. You might, do some research, and you might Google it. You might ask some other coaches. A lot of the time, the drills we end up doing is the same drills that our coaches did for us when we were players. So that's where it starts off. Then it moves on to looking for plays, and you get this real hunger to, what do they do in the NBL? What do they do in the NBA? How can I run some of those things with my team? And you get this real yearning for plays. You want to get as much of them as possible, and you want to try and use them all with your team. So that's the second part of it. Then moves into game coaching. So that's where, coaching games, you get better with your substitutions, timeouts, what to say in timeouts, you get a better feel for the momentum of games. Then you move on to the fourth point, which is you get into some more detailed information. So that might be video, that might be using statistics or analytics to help your team, but you look at some more detailed stuff and you try and think about how you can link that in with your coaching. From there, you get to the art of coaching, and I think this is really where you start to get it going with your coaching once you get to this point. And what I mean by the art of coaching, well, that's all the things you've probably heard at coaching clinics and coaching courses. You start to get better at those things. And things I'm talking about is, coaching on the run. It's being able to change behaviours of athletes who maybe maybe they aren't great at listening. You can, over time, change that behaviour so they become better at listening. It might be a particular skill that they've struggled with, and you find ways to be able to help them to get to that skill. It's finding coachable moments and having a better coach's eye and understanding when to stop, start, practice. So that's kind of the art of coaching. And that's, on this evolution, that's the 5th point. You then move to the 6th point, and it's about relationships, and you get a better understanding of how important relationships with your athletes are, how important relationships with your staff is. You get better at your interpersonal skills. You get better at managing your staff, managing upwards, downwards. So relationships, that's the 6th part of it. And then the end of it is program leading. So it's kind of pulling all that together, all the drills, all the plays you have, all the other stuff, and you start to lead a program. Now, that might be Mark, leading the Basketball Tasmania program. But for some of you, you might be the under-14 Division 1 coach, and there's a Division 2 team, and they might train with you. Well, in a way, you're leading that program. You're leading the under-14 program at your club. Obviously, there's going to be some of you on this tonight who you might have a particular role within your club, your association, and in a way, you're leading that basketball program. So that's kind of the evolution in a quick nutshell of how coaches over time evolve. So the next question I want you to think about, where do you sit right now in that evolution? Like, where is it that you fit in within all that? One thing I would say is, and we say this to the athletes all the time, development, it's not linear. So same with the coach. You're not, as nice as it looks that you're going to go from drills to plays to this, that's not quite how it works. So it's not that linear. And what you might find is you actually might be working on some of those things kind of all at the same time. But if you had to pick one thing out of that evolution, one point that you said, all right, this is where I think for the most part I am, well, what is that? And I want you to have a think about that. For me, if I was, and I like I said, I probably think I'm a bit of everywhere. I'm always looking for more drills, always looking for plays, how I can use more detailed information. If I had to pick one thing, I'd probably say I'm at 0.6. I'm trying to get better at relationships with athletes, relationships with staff, relationships with parents. Is probably where I would say I'm at right now in this evolution of a coach. So how does all this, how does it link back to me and my journey? And I guess more than anything, how is what I'm talking about, how is it going to be relevant to you? How can it help you develop as a coach? Well, as we all know, there's more things available to us now, more than ever before. So there's so many great clinics online. There's so many great podcasts, books. There's just so much that's available to us. And I think it's really important with everything we get that we actually have a real think about it. Well, actually, how much of that do I really use? Because I've definitely been on, watched some clinics online, and there's a lot of great stuff, but for the most part, I actually don't use much of it. So I think when you do things such as tonight, where it's a webinar, is there one thing that you can take out of it that you can use? So like that great quote that says, if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough. So when you read a book, when you watch a clinic, when you go to a practice session, is there one thing that you can take from that experience that you can then use to form your opinion on basketball, form your philosophy? So for me, some of the key learnings, and I guess the one point I got from some of my experiences I've had, and these are 4 coaches who I've been really fortunate to learn a lot from. And I need to say that this slide here, it's definitely an oversimplification. It's not just these things that I've learned from them, it's many things. But if I had to pick one thing from each of these coaches, it would be these things. So from Peter Wanigan, who, for those who don't know, works with Basketball Australia, big thing I've learned from him is just the value of learning and always trying to grow and learn and get better at your craft. From Aaron Fern, from him, the biggest thing I learned from him was just how important having a mentor is. From Mark Radford, biggest thing I've learned from him is relationships and how important they are. And at the end of the day, that's probably the most important thing when it comes down to the end of it, is the relationships that you have with your players, with the other coaches, with the staff you have. And then from Mick Downer, biggest thing I probably have learned from him is, you've got to be organised, you've got to have a plan. So, like I said, that's an oversimplification, and there's definitely plenty of other coaches who I've learned from along the way. But these 4 themes here, I'm going to kind of jump on. I'm going to kind of cover in the next few slides, and going to keep referring back to these 4 themes throughout. So, for the first thing is learning, and as coaches, we need to invest in our own learning. So, the first point I have there is, I want you to think about how much other development do you do. And what I mean by other development, some of you are involved with us as network coaches, and you come to our practice sessions. But outside of that, are you doing anything else? Are you watching coaching clinics? Are you, listening to podcasts? Are you trying to research stuff? Are you doing other development? I think the best coaches, they have a real growth mindset. They understand that they don't know it all, and they are always trying to get better. They're always trying to evolve. You look at Greg Popovich, who argues is the most successful coach of all time, particularly in basketball. If he was to do now what he did 20 years ago, it wouldn't work. So he's a coach who's been able to evolve over time, and that's why he's still a very, very successful basketball coach. So the best coaches have this growth mindset. One thing I really recommend, and the third point there, is connect with coaches in other sports. And this is something I've been fortunate to be able to do a little bit since I've moved down to Hobart. I've been to maybe 1 or 2 Hobart Hurricanes practice sessions, and I've been able to catch up with the coaches and have a conversation with them. And obviously, when I'm watching cricket, there's not too much from a skill point of view. There's little bits. There's not too much from a skill point of view that I can take away from those sessions. But it's how they're organised. It's how the coaches have relationships with their athletes. It's listening to them, how they've built that program. So you can get a lot from coaches in other sports. And I think that's something for you to consider when it comes to your other development is maybe can you invest in going and watching an AFL practice? Can you go watch a hockey practice? Can you learn something from other coaches? Because for the most part, we're all kind of dealing with the same stuff, be it a different sport. Then when you do invest in your learning, so when you do all this other development, go back and look through your notes again. I think, actually I've heard this at a course I did maybe a year or 2 ago, that 70% of notes are never looked at again when you take notes at clinics. 70% of it are significantly high. So, when was the last time you went back and had a look through your notes from clinics? Maybe when was the last time you went back and had a look through your practice plans from from a few seasons ago? When was the last time you had a look at some notes you took from a particular season or a game plan? So can you go back through that stuff? And what you'll find is when you do go back through your notes is you'll find some things that are maybe really relevant and could really help you right now. And then, like I said before, when you do this, when you go back through your notes, can you identify just one key thing that you can take away from that you can use moving forward? The next thing is, as a coach is, and I think it's pivotal if you want to develop as a coach, is you need to find yourself a mentor. And when you're looking for a mentor, what you're really looking for is someone who's going to make you think harder and someone who's going to make you work harder. So I've been really fortunate. I've had a lot of really good mentors over the years. I'd probably say to this point, my biggest mentor has been Aaron Fern. And the things I got from him is kind of listed there. The biggest thing you get from Fernie is just his work ethic. Like, he just works so incredibly hard, and then he pushes you to be better. He pushes you to work really, really hard, and he gets you to understand that you are what you repeatedly do. So you can't just do something well once, you have to do it every single day. And he really embraces that grind. One other thing I really got from him and his mentorship was, well, take care of the level you're at. So you have a responsibility to give your best no matter what level you're coaching. And I use my current situation as an example. I need to treat an under 18 STP session the exact same as I treat an under 12 session. I have a responsibility at every session I go to give my best to those athletes. And that was something he really got me to understand, is you take care of that, you give it your best, then good things will happen for you over time. And then the last kind of thing there is, with a mentor, you want to have someone who you can have regular conversations with. And it was definitely something I had with Fernie, and I was really lucky. He came and he watched a lot of my practice sessions. He watched a lot of games. And sometimes I didn't want to have those conversations with him, and he would make sure we had them. And sometimes he told me stuff I didn't want to hear. But I think that's super pivotal as you find yourself a mentor if you want to develop as a coach. The next thing, and like I said, I owe a lot of this to Mark Radford and what I've learned from him over the last few years. It's EQ is the number one thing. So EQ is emotional intelligence. That is the most important thing you need as a coach if you want to be successful. Mark has said it, and it's one of my favorite quotes that I've got from him, is at the end of the day, when everything's said and done, when the season's over, when you've retired, whatever it is, all you have left is your mates and your memories. And I think that's really valuable for you to understand that as a coach. And that ties in with your emotional intelligence and building those relationships with athletes. Part of that is, as a leader, you need to understand that your mood and your behaviors, that's going to drive everyone else's mood and behaviors. So if you think about it, there's probably been some practice sessions you've gone to where maybe you've been a bit flat. Maybe you had a really busy day at work, and you've come to practice, and your mind's still kind of at work and you're just not quite there. And then next thing that happens is it's just not a great practice session, because the athletes can sense that your focus isn't there. They can sense that your mood and your energy is not great. So as a leader, we need to be really aware of that. And we have to understand that our mood and our behaviors, it sets the tone for everyone. Just some things, and I'm a part of my learning is I'm currently studying online part-time, and one unit I'm doing right now is actually on leadership, and there's a lot of really good research and a lot of really good studies that have been done around how important emotional intelligence is for leaders, and these are some of the things that it showed, that the leaders who had a higher level of emotional intelligence, their teams, whether it be a business environment, whether it be with a team, well, if you had a higher level of emotional intelligence, there's more sharing within the group. There's more trust, and learning really flourishes when you have a high level of emotional intelligence. On the flip side, if you have a low level of emotional intelligence, then there's going to be a higher anxiety. So you think about coaching, if you're not great EQ, then the athletes are going to be quite anxious. Now, a part of anxiety, it can actually help you in the short term. It can help you, get some things done in the short term because you're a little bit on edge. You don't want to stuff up. You don't want to, because you're anxious. But as we know, over time, that's just not going to be sustainable. And you think about athletes, they come to every single practice session and they're really, really anxious, then that won't be their next season. So EQ, it's the number one thing. Last thing, I guess, of those themes I touched on before is planning. And this is probably my favorite quote here. So success, it's the result of preparation, hard work, and learning from failure. So when you look at that, if that's how you are going to be successful, then the first step is having a plan and being prepared. So if you want to have a good practice, you want to have a good tournament, you want to have a good season, then plan. That's the first thing you've got to get done. I'm going to, over the next few slides, just kind of break down planning. And I think this is the stuff I was talking about that's going to be really relevant, that you can really take from this and use for your upcoming seasons. So what we have with our planning, we have a macro plan, which is really short, it's concise, and it's just it's a big picture overview of what you're trying to get done that particular season. You then break it down further into micro plans, which are more detailed, and it really breaks down the individual parts of it. So for me, how I like to do it is I have a macro plan. So this is, as an example, is what a macro plan might look like. As you can see, it's not really detailed. It's very short, concise. It's just, all right, that's what we want to cover on offense. That's what we want to cover on defense. You might have some general points, maybe around practice habits and stuff like that. But it's really short, concise. That's what my macro plan looks like. Then with the micro plan, I break it down a little bit further and I go into a monthly plan. So as you can see, as a part of the monthly plan, there's a particular theme for the month, so an emphasis of the month, whatever it might be. There's certain things we're going to review and we're going to touch on that we have covered previously. And then there's going to be a certain element of stuff that we're going to introduce. Now, whether that is a particular play, whether that's a new drill, but that's how I like to break it down, is into a monthly plan. And then the final part of my micro planning, so you have the overall plan, you have your monthly plan, and then the final part of the plan is a practice plan. And if you're going to do any planning from this Zoom tonight, I want it to be for you. I'd like it for you to choose practice planning. And I'm sure most of you already do this, but having a plan for practice, like I said, that's going to set you up to be able to have a good practice session. Just a few little points on what my practice plan looks like. I kind of break it, as you can see, into 4 parts. The first part of it is stuff that I want to talk about before the practice session starts. That might be in a group address. I might have some points in there around certain athletes I want to try and individually connect with before practice starts. So I have kind of a conversation part of practice. I then break the time I have into roughly thirds. So if I have a 90-minute practice session, then 30 minutes is going to be on skills. 30 minutes is going to be on concepts of play. And by concepts of play, that's like small-sided games. So that's like 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 2-on-1 plus 1, 3-on-3. That's what concepts of play is. And then gameplay, it's gameplay. You're putting them in certain situations and you're playing, whether that's 3-on-3, 4-on-4, 5-on-5. So that's kind of how I like to break my practices down. There's obviously a bunch of different ways you can do that, but that's just an example of my practice plan and what that might look like. The last, I guess, thought and question I want to ask you before I quickly summarize everything I've just gone and given you, I want you to think about this. So when was the last time you did something for the first time? And this is a question I've heard Peter Wanigan say many times, and really think back, okay, when was the last time I've done something for the first time? Maybe it's a drill, maybe it's a play, but think about it. For some of us, maybe we haven't done something new in a while, and that's okay, but a part of learning and growing and developing as a coach is you've got to be able to continue to add to your bow of things that you can get done. So maybe that's one challenge to take out of this Zoom is the upcoming season. Like, can there be one thing that you're going to try new with your team this season that you haven't done before? And you'll probably find when you do it, you're not going to be great at it and it might not work very well. And then it's part of developing as a coach is you then go back and you review it and you reflect and you really invest into it, and you'll get better at it. There might be some things, and I've definitely done this particularly with drills. I've tried some drills at practice, and then I realized very quickly, no, I'm not going to ever do that ever again. So that's part of it as well. Trying something new is you find out what your strengths are as a coach, and you can continue to develop that aspect of things. So to, I guess, summarize, and I know I've given you a lot of information here and a lot of questions, and I hope I've been able to stimulate some thought. So to summarize, these are the 5 things that I would summarize it with. So growth mindset. All good coaches, and if you want to develop as a coach, you have to have a growth mindset. You need to invest in your learning. You need to invest, whether it be money, to go to coaching courses, whether it's to travel, to the mainland to go watch some NBL practice sessions as an example. Maybe it's to go to the COE, you invest some money into it. Okay, maybe it's you invest time into it or effort, but you need to invest something if you want to develop as a coach. One thing with that investing, and I mentioned it in my journey, half the time when you just ask a question, you'll be really surprised that people are willing to help you. So volunteer, ask for help. The next thing is mentor. So find yourself one, and someone who can watch games, who can watch practices, who you can have regular conversations with. Find yourself a mentor. Plan and be organised. I think if I was to say what one of my real strengths is, it would be that, is having a plan, being organised, because I think that's the first part of being successful. And then with everything you do, can you summarise it? Can you simplify it so that you can then share that with the athletes and it's easier for them to understand? So yeah, thanks everyone for that. Like I said, I know I covered a lot of information there, but Mark, I'll hand it back to you.
The credit to your presentation is we didn't have many questions because you covered it in depth, which is you. That's definitely a strength of yours, and I know that you've been great in that space for me. And being mentored, I know, by Mick Downer, and if any of you know Mick or ever have the opportunity to watch anything that he's involved in, it's always very in-depth and precise. And he was in Perth my first year that I went there, and I don't think I would have survived 1 year if it hadn't been for Mick Downer. He is unbelievable. So I'm sure that we'll see him in the NBL as a head coach further down the track, and he's obviously influenced you a great deal from that standpoint. We do have a couple of questions just come in. Here we go. How far in advance do you plan your individual session plans, and does this impact your themes weekly or monthly?
Good question. I would say, so I typically, say for programming, I'll typically do my practice plan for the week on a Monday. And with that, for the most part, I try and it's the reason why I go for a monthly plan is you can get, say, 4, maybe 5 practices in for the month. So there's going to be some sessions you're going to have where you're not going to touch on some things that are really covered for the month, like in your focus, because maybe, from prior sessions, or maybe you've had some games and there's some things that you just immediately need to address. So, I think over the course of a month, you can cover off on those things well enough. How far in advance? Yeah, I normally do it, the day before or a couple of days before. Something, when I wasn't working in this full-time capacity, when I was coaching club back in Cairns, I would have my plan done, maybe 1 or 2 hours before practice. There are some times where with state teams where I'll go away, we'll go away for a camp, and I'll probably have, let's say we have 4 sessions, I'll probably have the first 2 sessions planned out, and then the next 2 sessions, it's a bit of let's review how it went, what do we need to cover off on more. So that's kind of how I like to go about it with my planning.
Okay, good. Peter Roby has sent this one through. How is the best way for me to start building my emotional intelligence?
Yep, really good question. And like I said, for me, if I was to look at the evolution, for me, that's something that I'm trying to work on myself. So I don't know if I would say I'm an expert in that field right now. I think, like anything, just invest into it. So to research, interpersonal skills, how to develop those. I think at the end of the day, when it comes to those interpersonal skills, you just get better at it by doing it. So have more conversations with athletes. And there's actually a really good quote that the quality of a conversation is determined by the quality of questions you ask. So if you find yourself, and to give an example, I had under 12s tonight, under 12 girls, I'm shocking with conversations with them because I just don't know what to talk to them about. Tonight was my best night having conversations with them. And the reason was I just asked better questions. I went up to them and I said, "Oh, how's school? What'd you cover at school?" And then, it was just a matter of I just asked the right question. So I think, have more conversations, do some research on it. And it's definitely something that it takes time to develop. And, I'm sure for a lot of us, we have the intent to have a high level of emotional intelligence, but it just takes time to get to a point where it's where you want it to be.
Very good. From Bradley Can. If coaching a team which plays weekly, how much do you plan in your sessions to review your game? Do you include space in sessions to focus on certain areas from that game?
Yeah, and good question. I think kind of ties in with what I'd said prior, as far as there's definitely, some things that you want to, there's parts of your practice that you want to dedicate to covering off whatever it is that month you want to cover off on. And then there's going to be times in your practice that you need to dedicate time to reviewing stuff. I would say a lot of the gameplay stuff is probably tied more around what we need to improve on that we weren't great at. If we were playing every single week, a lot of the gameplay stuff would be tied in with that. Whereas maybe the stuff we have in the monthly plan might be more so tied into the concepts of play or the skill development aspect of my practice sessions.
I think another point, if I can elaborate on that, is not getting caught up in the junior side of it on weekly wins, and you've got to just start to narrow your focus. Still got to keep a broad focus on development, even though you're trying to be successful on a weekly basis. Still a range of skills that you've got to get done and expose the athletes to. I
think just to bounce off you there, that is the reason why I have an overall plan. That is the reason why there's a monthly plan, is it holds me accountable. So when I get to the very end of the season, I go back and look, and I want to make sure I'm probably not going to have covered everything as well as what I would have liked, but I'm going to make sure I've covered off on a good 70 to 80% of that. Whereas if I don't have that monthly plan, then you can definitely fall, like you said, you can definitely fall in the habit of you're just so focused on the last game and, reviewing stuff, and then you actually never introduce the athletes to anything new.
Coaching during the season based on weekly game and feedback versus sticking to the long-term plan probably just covers off a little bit on that as well, of what you just said. That was Pete again. I think you just covered that really in terms of staying focused on the long term. You can still give weekly game feedback because you want athletes to get better from the game that they've obviously just played. So I think you covered that also. If there's any more questions, just take a minute. If you want to punch any through, it'd be great. Anything else, Nick, that you wanted to touch on from that standpoint?
Not really, no. Again, thanks everyone. We'll definitely send through a copy of my presentation as well. I know there was a lot of stuff I gave you all just then, and I know we cruised through it pretty quickly.
I think something that you sort of alerted me on early, and I've not early in this, but early when you got here, Nick, was your pathway, and something that I've really focused on is trying to find athletes that are coming out of 18s and 20s that may not have a playing career long term, but have a high level of IQ and have great interpersonal skills, and that we can start transferring into coaches. And I advise everybody here to try and find somebody in their club that is like that. Hayden Zazadny is an example of one athlete. Matt Haywood was another athlete that we've worked to get into coaching. And another one I've identified in the under 18s is Eli French. I think he's going to play for a long time, and he'll go as far as he possibly can. But his ability to connect and transfer information at his age, I don't want to cut off his playing career, but I've certainly spoken to him about it's something that he should start to think about because he has some special skills. So if you have people in your club that you feel that could go down that path and you can cache that conversation, I think it's highly valuable, because to be a long-term career coach, it does help if you start early. No more questions come through, so I just we'll wrap it up